Hello students, in this video we will cover remainder rules. There are total 6 rules, so let's see one by one. So let's see the rule number 1. What rule number 1 says? What rule number 1 says? It says if two same number, let's assume A, is divided by two different divisor and the greater divisor is a multiple of smaller divisor. So what it says in language, same number divided by two different divisor, where greater divisor is a multiple of smaller divisor. So, and in this also we know the remainder of greater divisor, and we know the remainder of greater divisor. So for example, let's assume that A by KD will give us some quotient, remainder, the divisor K and D. Okay, so it will give us a remainder capital R. So we have to find the small r, where small r is the remainder of smaller divisor. Let's take it capital Q, and it will be a small q, R and D. So there are two cases. Case number 1 says if the greater remainder is larger than the smaller divisor, then smaller remainder will be remainder of capital R by D. Okay. What case number 2 says? Case number 2 says if bigger remainder is smaller than, greater remainder is smaller than smaller divisor, then smaller remainder will be simple greater remainder. So smaller remainder will be equal to greater remainder. So let's take some questions so that you can understand it more clearly. So let's see a question based on rule number 1. So here is a question. If a number is divided by 846, the remainder is 23. What will be the remainder if it is divided by 18 or 94? Okay, so let's see this question. Yeah. So let's take the first one. Now, to apply rule number 1, what rule number 1 says? If a number is divided by two different divisor and the greater divisor is a multiple of smaller divisor, to apply rule number 1 we have to check the condition that the greater divisor is a multiple of smaller divisor. So how we will check? We will check simply by dividing 846 by 18. Yes, so we will simple check 846 dividing by 18. So let's divide it. We will take 18 for the 72. Okay, so it will be a 1, 2, 6. Now we know that the 6 in one's digit come only when 8 is multiplied by, or 18 is multiplied by 7. So it will be 126. So here it proves that 846 is a multiple of 18. Okay, now here it goes with case number 1. What case number 1 says? It says when remainder is greater than smaller divisor. So smaller divisor is 18 and remainder is 23. So here 23 is greater than 18. So the remainder will be 23 by 18. Okay. So the remainder will be 23 by 18. So what will be the smaller remainder? It will be 23 by 18, which will be, actually this is not 23 by 18, this is the remainder of 23 by 18, so it will be an 5. So the smaller remainder will be a 5. Okay, now let's see question number second. Okay, let me change the ink. So here let's see 846 is a multiple of 94 or not. 846 is a multiple of 94 or not. Okay, so how we will check? So we know that it will goes off by a 9, so 94 into 9, so it will be a 6 and 84. Okay, so 846 is a multiple of 94, and it goes with case number 2. What case number 2 says? When greater remainder is smaller than divisor. Here 23 is smaller than 94, so the smaller remainder will be the greater remainder, so the r will be 23. Okay, so let's see rule number 2. What rule number 2 says? If two different numbers, for example, let's say A and B, when divided by the same divisor, let's say the same divisor is a D, leaves remainder R1 and R2. It means R1 by D, and let's take the quotient Q1, and here Q2 R2 by D. Okay, leaves remainder R1 and R2 respectively. Then their sum, if divided by the same remainder, will leave remainder R. So it is basically saying when A plus B is divided by the D, it will leave remainder capital R. Okay, so given by, we have to find what is capital remainder. We have been given the small remainders R1 and R2. We have to find the capital R. So there are two cases again in rule number 2 also. So case number 1 will be if R, if R1 plus R2 is greater than D, then the remainder will be R1 plus R2 minus small d. Okay. Case number 2 says if R1 plus R2 is smaller than D, then the remainder will be R1 plus R2. So this is the rule number 2. So let's take an example so that you can understand it more clearly. Okay, let's see the question. What question says? Two different numbers when divided by 47 leaves remainder 13 and 23 respectively. If their sum is divided by the same number 47, what will be the remainder? So here the condition is saying if A is divided by 47, it gives remainder 13, and if B is divided by 47, it gives remainder 23. Okay, so if A plus B is divided by 47, what will be the remainder? Okay, so the condition is that A plus, oh sorry, it's not A plus B. Wait a minute. Yeah, so the condition is that there are two cases. Case 1, number 1 says if R1 plus R2 is greater than D, or case 2 says R1 plus R2 is smaller than D. So here 13 plus 23 will be 36, which is smaller than 47. So the remainder capital R, the remainder capital R will be 36. Okay, so the remainder will be 36. If this condition satisfies, means R1 plus R2 is small greater than D, then the remainder will be R1 plus R2 minus D. But here the condition is just opposite. 36 is smaller than the divisor. So the remainder will be 36. Okay, so let's move to rule number 3. Let's see rule number 3. Rule number 3 says when two numbers, for example, take A and B, these are two numbers, after being divided by the same divisor. So let's divide the two number by D and by D, leaves the same remainder. So it will be Q1 R by D, okay, and it will be Q2 R by D. Then the difference of those two numbers must be exactly divisible by the same divisor. So the difference A minus B will be exactly divisible. It means there will be no remainder. Okay, so this says rule number 3. Now let's take an example so that you can understand more clearly. So the question says two numbers 53 and 37 after being divided by a divisor leaves the same remainder. Then their difference of these two numbers on being divided by the same divisors leaves a remainder of. So in rule number 3, let's recall rule number 3. What it says, if A is divided by D and B is divided by D. So A minus B will be A minus B will be exactly divisible, means no remainder. If A by D gives remainder R and B by D also gives remainder R, so A minus B gives no remainder. So here two numbers 53 and 37 after being divided by a divisor leaves the same remainder. So it is the same case, 53 by D and 37 by D, and both leaves remainder R. So their difference means 53 minus 37 will be equal to 16. If divided by D, will leave no remainder. So the option C is correct. Now move to rule number 4. Let's see rule number 4. Okay. So here is the rule number 4. If a given number is divided successively by different factors of the divisor, leaving remainder R1, R2 and R3 respectively, then the true remainder, that is the remainder when the number is divided by the divisor, can be obtained by using the formula. So basically rule number 4 is saying if a given number, let's assume A, is divided successively by different factors of the divisor. Let's say D is our divisor and its factor will be D1 into D2 into D3. These are the three factors of the divisor. So if A is divided by D1, will leave remainder R1. A divided by D2 will leave remainder R2, and A divided by D3 will leave remainder R3. So what will be the remainder? So true remainders means what will be the remainder when the number A is divided by the divisor, means D. So if A is divided by the divisor D, not by its factor but by the true divisor, so what will be the remainder? So the true remainder will be the first remainder plus second remainder into first divisor plus third remainder into first divisor into second divisor, means remainder of A by D will be first remainder, means R1, plus second remainder into first divisor, means R2 into D1. So it will be R2 d1 plus third remainder means r3 into first divisor and second divisor. So r3 into d1 into d2. So it will give the true remainder. Now let's see a question of it. Here, a number being successively divided by 5, 7 and 11 leaves remainder 3, 1, 2 respectively. Find the remainder if the same number is divided by 3, 8, 5. So to apply rule number 4, we have to check that is 5, 7 and 11 are the factors of 385 or not. So 385, let's see its factors. So it will be a 7 and a 7, again 11. So the factors of 385 is 5 into 7 into 11, and the remainder is 3, 1 and 2. So the true remainder, what will the true remainder? True remainder will be first remainder, means 3. Here 5 is d1, 7 is d2, 11 is d3, 3 is r1, r2 and r3. So by the formula, r1 means 3 plus r2 into 5. So 1 into 5 plus में r3 means 2 into 5 into 7. So 2 into 5 into 7. So it will be 3 plus 5 plus 70, which will be 78. So the answer of the question means the true remainder when the number being divided by 385 will give the remainder of 78. Okay. Now let's move to rule number 5. Here is the rule number 5. When x plus 1 की power n means x plus 1 the power is n divided by x, the remainder is always 1. So remainder will be always 1, where x and n are natural numbers. X and okay, sorry, I have made an R. X and n are natural numbers, means 1, 2, 3 and so on. Now let's see a question of it. Okay, here is the question. 17 to the power 21. So it is 16 plus 1 to the power 21. When divided by 16, will definitely leave a remainder of 1 as per rule number 5. So this was a question of rule number 5. Now let's move to rule number 6. Rule number 6 says x minus 1 to the power n when divided by x will leave a remainder 1 when n is even natural. What will be then? N will be even natural. And x minus 1 when n is equal to odd natural. Let's see a question of it. Here 29 to the power 75. 29 means it is 30 minus 1 and the power is 75. So the when divided by 30 will leave definitely a remainder of 29. Why? Because the n means n is odd. Here 75 is odd natural. So it will leave a remainder of 29. So this was all from my side. Before closing the video, let's recall all the rules one by one. Start with rule number 1. Let's see rule number 1. Rule number 1 says if same number is divided by a divisor and a multiple of divisor, a KD multiple of divisor, and the remainder of the greater divisor is R. So the remainder of smaller divisor will be remainder of R by D when R is greater than D, and remainder will be r when d is greater than r. This was rule number 1. And now rule number 2. What rule number 2 says? Let's in the color. Okay. So rule number 2 says if a is divided by d, b is divided by d, and the remainder of a by d is r1 and the remainder of b by d is r2, then a plus b when divided by d will give a remainder r1 plus r2 minus d when r1 plus r2 is greater than d, or r will be r1 plus r2 when r1 plus r2 is smaller than d. So this was rule number 2. When two different numbers a and b divided by the same divisor leaves remainder r1 and r2, then their summation will give the remainder r1 plus r2 minus d. Only when the condition is satisfied that r1 plus r2 is greater than d. So this was rule number 2. Now let's see rule number 3. So rule number 3 says, rule number 3. What is rule number 3 says? When two numbers a by d, b by d will give the same remainder. So the remainder of a by d is r, b by d is also r. Then the difference a minus b when divided by d will give no remainder because it will be exactly divisible by d. So the difference of those two numbers will exactly be divisible by d. Okay. Now let's see rule number 4. Rule number 4. What rule number 4 says? If a number, let's assume a, is successfully divided by the factors of true divisor, means let's d1 into d2 into d3 are the factors of the divisor d. So if a is divided by d1 will give remainder r1, a divided by d2 will give remainder r2, a divided by d3 will give remainder r3. Then when a divided by d, the remainder will be, it will be remainder 1 plus remainder 2 into d1 plus remainder 3 into d1 into d2. So this was the rule number 4. Let's see rule number 5. What says rule number 5? Okay, so rule number 5 says if x to the power x plus 1 to the power n divided by x will give the remainder will be the 1. And what about rule number 6? Rule number 6 says, uh, if x minus 1 to the power n divided by x will give a remainder 1 when n is even natural number, means 1 when n is even natural number, and it will give x minus 1 as remainder when n is odd natural number. So x minus 1 to the power n by x will leave a remainder 1 when n is even natural number, and x minus 1 as a remainder when n is odd natural number. So this was all from my side, all 6 remainder rules, and the questions definitely come from this in the competitive exam. So if you like the video, hit the like button and subscribe the channel for upcoming quant videos. uh, Thank you, and let's, okay.